Great Debaters Contest is brought to you by Safaricom M-Pesa.
Karibu Eldoret, where we have pitched camp for this edition of the Great Debaters Contest. The weather here is chilly, but the debates will certainly be heated. I am your host, Mariam Bishar.
And I am Austin Yumbok. Metkei boys versus Plateau girls. The motion is Africa should stop over-dependence on the developed world and prioritize intra-Africa trade. Who will be the victor?
We'll let the first debater take the stage. Proposal number 1, you have 3 minutes.
I'm Mamu Enos from Plateau Girls. What is overdependence? This is depending exceedingly in other countries. Let's say other nations outside Africa. Then intra-Africa trade. This is trading within Africa. Then what is trade? Trade is the exchange of goods and services. Trade is also a powerful engine for economic growth and development. Many countries in Africa and other nations, they have been developing, but Africa has not been developing or benefiting due to its overdependence in other nations. International trade statistics have indicated that Africa in the world trade has really declined. It has declined by 6% in 25 years ago, yet around 2% as we are talking, less than 1% if South Africa is excluded. This is not a good trend in trade compared to other nations, such as Western Europe. In Western Europe, they normally trade over 60% and 90% within Western Europe nations too. And to our first point, we are very happy that we've really gained independence. But what about neocolonization? Those developed countries have really come into Africa and bring out their finished product out of our raw materials. This does not encourage really trade. Let's talk of exploiting our raw material, of exploiting our resources, that is it. It is not trending that well. Simply because those nations come to Africa and they exploit it. Then, what do we have? What have we been left with? So, intra-Africa trade, it creates unity in all spheres of life. Invention by founding fathers of AU, that is Julius Nyerere. Thank you.
Proposal number 1, you have 3 minutes.
I am Bethel Kiprano, and I study at Metkei Boys High School. I said so because in China, the basis of the economy is their education. China has the best system of education based on experience. In China, a child starts his career at very low age. A child worth 7 years can make such Casio watch like the one you're wearing. While we in Kenya start our careers finish at the 4th year, starting at the 1st year. Only 4 years of experience. Kenyans, my fellow Africans, tell me if we are going to succeed if our system of education is not suited. Therefore, we depend on Chinese to come and build our roads because we don't have experienced civil engineers. If our education was good, we would have built our own roads. But because our education system is not suited, we have to import the trained personnel to come and build our roads. How can we stop depending on them before improving our education system? Turn the page. Let's talk about the standard gauge railway. It is Kenya's most suited project for attainment of the Vision 2030. We cannot imagine to succeed in this if we don't borrow money. Kenya borrowed 309 billion from China to build the standard gauge railway. Where do you think the money could have come from if we had not borrowed? This is because Kenya needs to borrow money. To my third point, most African countries import fertilizers from the developed world. We in Kenya also do so. Kenya's and Africa's 45 countries in Africa depend on agriculture for economy. For agriculture to grow, we need fertilizers. Yet in Africa, no country manufactures fertilizers. We therefore need fertilizers from the developed world to improve on our agriculture. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you, where do you think we will get such fertilizers to improve our agriculture if we don't depend on them? Lastly, I want to talk about intra-trade. Intra-trade is the trade between African countries. Trade between Kenya, Nigeria, Rwanda. Rwanda specializes in agriculture, while Nigeria specializes in oil mining. For Nigeria to give oil to Rwanda, there must be trade. But in Nigeria, there is political instability. How do we expect such countries to trade? Let's continue asking ourselves if really we can depend on ourselves. Thank you.
Second proposer, you have 3 minutes for a rebuttal.
My name is Hema Charus from Plateau Girls, and I would strongly want to propose the motion: Africa must end overdependence on the developed world by prioritizing intra-Africa trade. Absolutely, because foreign trade is actually hurting Africa. As you know, the Africans actually like depending on the foreign aid. Take for instance the importation of cheap imports, like the importation of mitumbas. It actually kills the economy of our country. The locals do not buy their own products, killing our economy. Why don't we promote our products? Why don't we promote intra-Africa trade? We also have we should exploit our own resources and identify them. Like for instance, we should be able to identify resources where we can get raw materials. For example, oil, refine our own resources. Not wait for the developed world countries to come and identify for us. Why don't we become independent? Promote our own local trade within ourselves. We also have the neo-colonization. I like to add on what Sylvia Mamua said, that we should actually open our eyes. It's time we toss away the overdependence on the developed world countries. We realize that we call ourselves independent countries, but we actually still depend on those developed world countries. It is now time that we toss away the donor recipient and embrace complexity by personal and complexity to make Africa grow by prioritizing the intra-Africa trade. Thank you.
Proposer number 2, you have 3 minutes as well.
I totally disagree by our opponent's decision to say that it is possible to prioritize intra-African trade, yet they don't know. The microphone I'm using right now is not an African product. This is impossible. It's like putting a hyena and a goat together, then telling them debate on what to have for supper. This is only possible after 1,000,000 years from now. Intra-African trade is impossible. 1, political instability in our African countries. Look at Sudan. Sudan are fighting over oil wells simply because the oil wells fell between the boundaries of Sudan and Southern Sudan. This can be a major economic, or this can grow the economic by far and make it a leading economy in Africa if only they decide to sit down as leaders and see the way forward. Look at inefficiency in our country. How can a leader select an IEBC official all over the way to the energy and petroleum sector? This is impossible. We all know that energy and petroleum sector is a major economic earner, is a major economic grower to countries like Kenya. Look at Kenya. We are now depending on the oil, which mining is about to start in the near future, in 2017. How will this person know the skills to tackle the challenges, to help improve on the strengths, to tackle the weaknesses that this sector might be facing? Flip the coin over to corruption. In 1990s, President Zambengwa of Congo Zaire was ranked the third richest president of Africa, yet the country he's ruling is among the poorest in Africa. Surely, are you ready to trade with such people? Are you ready to trade with people who are corrupt? If the president himself is corrupt, what about the ordinary citizen? Kenyans, you really need to think of that. If I get sick, I'll go to hospital. If I get seriously sick, I'll also go to hospital. If I need a surgery, the equipment that will be used to work on me is not from Africa. The equipment, recently, the President of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, commissioned health equipment worth 38 billion shillings. This equipment is not from Africa. Yet you say we need to prioritize an intra-African trade. First, you have not learned the skills from your own selves before you go to the other countries. Let's switch to Malawi. Malawi is a country whose currency is less worth than the paper it has been printed on. Surely, you are talking of intra-African trade, yet your currency is not worth. You need to think as Kenyans. Finally, look at Uganda. Uganda is a country. Uganda's president has refused to get out of power, yet he is unable to end the Lord Resistance Army. This is something slowly eating up his country. And if this persists, Uganda will end at a very miserable stage. Thank you.
Take part in the M Challenge by sending your short song, rap or poem about Safaricom M-Pesa on WhatsApp, and you could win 1,000 shillings in Safaricom airtime.
The audience has challenged the debaters on stage with a few questions. The proposers have been asked if we claim that we are independent, then how come we don't even have the know-how to harness our own resources such as oil? And the opposers have been challenged if we should sleep on our resources instead of using them and ending our foreign dependence. So we'll have them respond to the questions. Third proposer, you have 3 minutes.
I am Wavinya James from Plateau Girls High School. I would like to answer your question. You ask how can we exploit our resources while we don't have the machines? For example, you talked about the oil in Turkana. Are you trying to tell me that if we trade with other African countries, are we not going to acquire money so that we can buy those machines for mining that oil? Where will we take the money if, for example, Kenya trades with South Africa? Where are we going to take that money which we are trading with South Africa for? Are we only going to depend on those countries to give us the machines? Or are you telling me if they give us those machines, are they well wishers? When they give us, won't we pay for them? We accept that we are poor, but we should depend on ourselves rather than on foreign aid. For example, Africa should take example of countries like Indonesia and Malaysia. Do you know what happened to Malaysia and Indonesia? In the year 1980, the Malaysian government, the government expenditure, 80% was to come from foreign aid. And you know what happened in the year 1988? The government expenditure rose to 80% from 70. which they could rely on the foreign trade. Do you want the African countries to be like those countries? It was only through trade that they grew up and stopped depending on those foreign aid and depending on other countries. We accept that we are poor, yes, but Africa should prioritize trading within themselves so that the resources may not go to other continents. Do you know the reason why they call Africa the dark continent? It's just because we are sick that we are poor. Yes, I said we are poor, but we should prioritize trade in such a way that, are you trying to tell me that there was no sun in Africa so that they called it black continent? No, it is because we Africans, it is because they undermined us. We showed them that we can't do anything without them. That is why the historians came up and said that Africa is a dark continent. If Africans we ourselves say that no, we are not depending on you, but we can do it on our own. Do you know that Africa can be among those countries? It can be like USA. The minerals which you have in USA, even a country like Congo, we have many minerals in Congo, but it is there because they don't know how to exploit them. They are depending on foreign aid because they chose to depend on foreign aid rather on themselves. Africa can do it by depending on themselves and not the foreign countries to tell them on what they do. It is not the foreign countries to tell them that Africa, you should depend on us. You cannot do it, that we should help you. In combating diseases like HIV, malaria, we only depend on scientists from other countries to come up with ideas. Why not Africans? We Africans are capable. Are you trying to tell me that there are no scientists in Africa? Africans can do it. It is only that we should depend on ourselves. And so depending on those developed countries, we have resources. We should trade between ourselves. That is all. Thank you.
Third opposer, you have 3 minutes to respond to the audience.
First, I would say that in Africa we say and believe that we cannot bite a hand that feeds us. So here today, I nurse the developed world because I know that tomorrow they'll nurse me in return. My name is Kipruto Samson. So first, to answer that question that my fellow asked over there, is that my answer is very simple. We can develop as Africans only if we can curb the loops that we have in our government systems. For example, we have the problem of tax evasion. Like if we take, for instance, in Kenya, that over many years, let's say from 2002 or thereabout to 2011, we have lost 1.1 trillion Kenyan shillings. So you cannot tell me that Africa will start developing if we still evade to pay taxes. That one cannot work. That is not, and there's no logic that will bring us close to developing ourselves. Also, we need to check on our monetary systems. You cannot say that we can trade between each other while the currency, they very much differ. Because I will trade with a country that I know, when I do that, I'll have a lot of profit and interest in it. But now tell me, trading with a country, for example, like Zimbabwe. It was said some few years ago that if you want to be a millionaire or a billionaire, you can just cross over to Zimbabwe, and then you'll be a billionaire automatically. So you cannot tell me that we're going to trade and things work out. And then now, we cannot trade or we cannot depend on ourselves because we have no money. Let's take, for example, the Concert City. The Concert City expects for its completion, we need more than 1.3 trillion for its completion. And this is funded by the International Finance Corporation. And you cannot tell me that Africa, we have this money that we are ready to fund them. Okay, those are my answers and my points. Thank you.
We'll now hear closing submissions. Proposers, you have 1 minute.
What really concerns and saddens me is the level of dependence that African countries have on those developed countries. In my own view, Africa should depend on themselves and trade within themselves. Look, for example, those countries are really subjugating our economies. Like, for example, the other day they banned miraa, the consumption of miraa in Britain, and still we are consuming their tobacco in Kenya. Are you trying to tell me that why can't the Kenyan government, because they banned the consumption of miraa in Britain, why can't we also ban the consumption of tobacco in Kenya, which comes from Britain? Look here. Today, and the Kenyan government cannot speak anything because that is neocolonialism, because 60% of the Kenyan budget, 60%, it comes from foreign aid. So the Kenyan government, there is no way they are going to speak against the consumption of tobacco in Kenya, and yet they are going to ask for aid from Britain. There is no way they are going to do that. That is so as to make miraa to be consumed again in Britain. Because they banned miraa in Britain, we should also ban tobacco in Kenya, so that it may be tit for that is a fair game. Thank
you. Opposers, you also have a minute for your final submission.
I'm back again, and I'm here to say that you cannot cross the bridge before you come to it. How do you expect as Africa to grow before setting up measures? Growth is a gradual process. We ain't not to grow without going through processes. We cannot lie to ourselves that we are going to stop depending on them and immediately grow. Africa has no automobiles. Where do we expect to get such if first we don't borrow ideas? If we borrow ideas, we are going to make our own automobile manufacturing companies. Secondly, for these fertilizers, we must install first the fertilizer plants in order for us to enhance our agriculture. Kenya imports quality tea from countries like Afghanistan. We import rice as Africa from Pakistan. Why should we do that instead of enhancing our agriculture? Then I'm asking you, should we just stop depending on them, or we should first prioritize on developing ourselves first by increasing the exports more than the imports? Thank you.
Metkei boys, my challenge with your school is a connection. There needs to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. And what happened in your presentation is that Bethwell starts off, but he starts off from the beginning. You know, you dwell a lot on education, but I wish you were the second person so that you're building onto some of the things that Clement has raised. So for me, I think it was just a question of the flow, but you know, very good, a very good debate right there. Good attempt by Bethwell. Clement, good role in cross-examination. You understood your role very well. Very good beginning, and you know, of all the six, I think you really stood out for me. Samson, you responded to the questions well, but other than the response, what else? And so the only thing I remember about you was your response to the questions. And so as the last speaker, in addition to answering the questions, you need to say a lot more, you know, even if it's just one point that you want to be remembered with. All the best to the two schools.
Plateau girls, Mamu, thank you so much for defining the terms. You did very well in terms of definitions. However, you started off your team on a low tone, and so even the cross-examiner, Hama Tarus, also comes in on the same note. Your style and presentation, if improved, you would make a better speaker for the team leader. Hama, you did not cross-examine your opponents. You came and started giving us your submissions. And that simply means you did not listen to the other side so that you can at least weaken their points. That's your role as a second speaker. And so when that is lacking, you are penalized. Wavinya, you know, the question I was asking myself is, where were you? You know, you come in later on and you're very passionate. You know, you answer the questions very well. You are convincing and you got my attention. However, just a little generalization that you just need to check on. For example, you say that Congo has decided to or chosen to rely on foreign aid. You know, it's good to come out with facts and say this is the amount, maybe, or something of that sort with statistics. It helps out. All the best to the two teams.
Plateau girls, the first two speakers, you are not very strong. What you need to do as a team, you need to reorganize yourselves. because you need to start with energy, you need to start with a bang, possibly have Wavinya as the first speaker. Not to say that the other two, that is Mamu and Ham, are not good speakers, but what I'm saying is possibly you need a lot of practice to perfect your debating skills. Metkei, Bethwell, Clement, and Samson. Again, interesting debaters, beginning with Bethwell and Clement. Personally, the two of you impressed me quite a lot. Inductive reasoning demands that we sample and then draw conclusion from the samples you have collected. To the two teams, it was a fair debate. Kindly ensure that you improve on your teamwork. All the three of you must be good for your team to qualify to the next round of debate. If one is weak, then the team is going to have a problem. Otherwise, it was a fair debate.
The judges gave Plateau girls 61.5. Please give them a round of applause. And they gave Metkei boys 67.1, making them our winners today.
So from all of us here at the Great Debaters Contest, I am Austin Nyambok.
And I am Mariam Bishar. Remember to follow us on Twitter at Great Debaters EA. Of course, our thanks go out to KBC Channel 1 and to Safaricom M-Pesa. We'll see you next time.
The Great Debaters Contest was brought to you by Safaricom M-Pesa.